take a few moments and go through the draft of the superintendent evaluation. In my contract, it was determined that we would meet prior to September 15th to actually go through what my evaluation instrument would look like. We recognize that my evaluation instrument is really just a one-year evaluation instrument because we will be having changes to our district strategic plan after the conclusion of the school year. So what you'll see throughout this strategic plan is that you'll see sections that align, the categories align to the elements of the current district strategic plan. I did add a sixth category, which is entitled Effective Board Relations. Now, the reason why I added that is twofold. Number one, wanted to ensure that if there was anything else that was not necessarily covered within the district strategic plan, there was going to be a place where board members could go ahead and address whatever they needed to address in that section. The other thing is that I think it's important for me to get some feedback on just overall my ability to go ahead and be responsive, communicate, engage, whether it be with you or with your constituents. We want to make sure that that was able to be captured somewhere as well. So if it's not necessarily specific to one of the areas of the strategic plan, it would fall in category 6. The scoring legend is located on page 4. Commendable, meets expectations, reasonable progress towards expectation, and needs improvement. Wanted to go ahead and kind of talk through how we got to this scoring legend. We meet regularly, and as a result of meeting regularly, I want to be able to resolve any issues that are occurring just in time, right? So if there are certain things that need to be addressed, I want to be able to address those right away. And I think that we have built the rapport, even in a short amount of time, that we can have some dialogue around areas that you believe need to be addressed right away and those that may actually require more long-range strategic thinking. To that end, I think that we want to provide some deference to that relationship and that commitment for each other, which is why you don't necessarily see a 5-point scale, right? This is why you don't see a strongly disagree, slightly disagree, neither, and then on the strongly agree and agree side. This is more along the lines of an ongoing commitment to try to meet the goals of the district and ensure that the leadership that's being provided meets the expectations that are laid out within the strategic plan, and of course what you are desiring out of the superintendent for your constituents. Each category will have a set list of performance indicators. The performance indicators are are essentially what you will see within our strategic plan. Those haven't changed. And then, of course, at the bottom, you'll see a summary rating. And, of course, you'll go ahead and you'll list any comments relative to those summary ratings. The one area that that will be delayed will be category 1, which is why I recommend that we wait until July 31st to finalize the evaluation. We will not get the data from the state assessments until no later than June 30th. And if the last few years are any indication, we receive those somewhere around June 28th, 29th, or 30th. We want the ability for REA to go ahead and evaluate those results, be able to provide you a year-over-year comparison of that data, so then you can provide a more well-informed or balanced assessment of where we are relative to Category 1. The limitation of the existing strategic plan is that we don't necessarily have quantifiable metrics. That is definitely something we're going to be looking at as we build our next strategic plan. However, I believe that in deference to the existing strategic plan and time that's already kind of elapsed since I began, I think that we keep things the way that they are. And what I would ask is that as I pull together evidence relative to this evaluation, that I would want you to consider as part of the final evaluation process, that will include quantifiable evidence that you can use to determine where I might fall relative to these summary ratings. Okay, they can be used in part to make that determination, but again, they don't necessarily tie to specific quantifiable targets that don't exist in the current strategic plan. Okay.
And I do agree, just so I want to make sure that we're on the same sheet of music, because, like, for instance, we have talent management. It says coordinates recruitment and retention of employees, but we don't have a specific target that says, okay, we want to have a 10% vacancy rate, because 100% is the ideal perfection, but that's not really practical, and to have 100% employment. So we want to try to have a target that says, okay, we're at 95%, 90%, something like that, correct? And try to
For sure. So in the next iteration of the strategic plan, we would want to see year-over-year decreases. Obviously, we would love to get to 100% fill rate. I think that there are going to be opportunities for us to get much closer to 100% fill rate. But at this point, because we don't really know where we're starting,
Exactly.
it would be hard to really determine where we expect to end this particular year. That's no more evident than in category number 1, where we still have not necessarily received the cutoff scores for the first round of fast testing. So we won't have those until the fall. So that in and of itself becomes very difficult to quantify, because we won't really know what we're benchmarking next year's scores after when we don't actually receive what we got last year until it's level set in November
Right.
or December.
And the only thing I would take into consideration, Dr. Shanoff, is, and this is actually kind of in your favor too, because I want to be fair when I do my assessments, is accounting for population adjustment too. So if you go from 1 year to 1 year, let's say the number of incidents went up, but the number of students were 1,000 more students that we gained, because at the rate that we're growing, I'm trying to say where there's some kind of population factor taken into consideration when we're hitting that benchmark.
Yeah, thanks so much for bringing that up. I do think that that's a really important point, that we probably want to focus more on percentages as opposed to raw data. Percentages, I think, would be an apples-to-apples comparison. When we look at raw data, obviously there is some fluctuation in our student enrollment counts. There's fluctuation that exists within the number of teacher allocations that we may have. So I agree. I think that it's probably best to really focus in on percentages. And then if there are any mitigating factors that could impact those percentages, let's say, God forbid, we have another hurricane that affects the Caribbean, and there becomes a mass migration into the Central Florida area, then obviously we would want to go ahead and be able to kind of account for that somewhere.
Kind of like a management note, like a corporate.
Absolutely,
Corporate
yes.
report at the end of the year, we'll have management reports and say, hey, this is the reason why, this is the footnote.
For sure. Another thing that, we know in Category 3, when we talk about fiscal responsibilities, and, when we talk about fiscal responsibilities, we've kind of lumped IT and operational needs into fiscal responsibilities, which is something that we may want to consider extrapolating out and being much more intentional about certain KPIs relative to operations, certain KPIs that are relate to design and construction, and certain KPIs that relate to IT. But we already know that when it comes to the finance office, we know that we need to maintain a certain fund balance, correct? So, we also know that we want to maintain a certain bond rating. We know that we want to maintain a certain level of debt to, I don't want to say debt to equity, but, we want to have a specific amount of debt as opposed to, pardon me?
Debt capacity?
Debt capacity, thank you. For community engagement, obviously there are several strategies that we're trying to employ that are different this year. You'll see community engagement come up quite a bit when we go into that next iteration of the strategic plan, only because we are now starting to hear that a lot during the meet and treat events. That when we look at our most popular responses, a lot of it comes back to communication, websites, those types of things. Those are things that obviously we're going to want to make sure that we have very tightly accounted for in the next iteration of the strategic plan. But I think that what you'll see from us this year will be a little bit of a different posture. We're trying to be more intentional with me being kind of out there and in front of as many folks as possible, seeing my face on some of the banner stuff. I know that we just put out the first Marking Excellence video that's on our website, the Monday 5. Those are the types of things that we are being more intentional about connecting with our employees. Safety and security. We're constantly refining the threat assessment protocols. You'll see some of that on the regular board agenda tonight on how we believe we're actually going to bring that in even tighter. The relationships that exist between local law enforcement, how we coordinate not just with local law enforcement, but the Office of Safe Schools, DHS. Those are all things that certainly they're important, and we need to adapt board policy as necessary to ensure that we're complying with the ever-changing legislation relative to school safety and school hardening. And then Category 6, effective board relations. Again, these are pieces that we just added ourselves. So offers professional advice to the board on policy development and items. Obviously, sometimes that professional advice comes unsolicited, but sometimes you do ask, and so I will provide you my wisest counsel. And then impartial towards the board, works with the board as a member of the district leadership team. We will be establishing, again, the strategic plan somewhere in the January timeframe. We're going to begin that process. We wanted to make sure that we curated all of the meet and treat information, and then followed that up with kind of a community opportunity to provide any additional input before the board does move towards developing that next strategic plan. And then, of course, ensuring that we get the right people to help move us through the strategic planning process, to ensure that we're focused, to ensure that we're focused on the right things. Obviously, I act as the board's liaison when anytime I'm in public. I'm acting on the board's behalf, bringing greetings on behalf of the board, but then also making sure that I again am available to the board whenever the board finds me necessary to go ahead and act on whatever needs to be addressed. So the overall summary, which is on the final page, which is on page 11, the final page, would allow everybody to go ahead and input in where they believe I am, and then that will be curated together by the board chair. The board chair will then go ahead and share that data with me, and then that data would then be presented and approved at a board meeting. So then my evaluation ends up in the sunshine where it belongs. That is the extent of it. Do we have any questions relative to the instrument? Again, this is a one-year instrument. This is not an instrument that is going to be used when the next strategic plan rolls around. If we want to use the scoring legend, again, we can use bits and pieces again. If you like the formatting, we'll be able to use the formatting again. But I do think that we'll be able to move to a point where we'll get more quantifiable, more granular about where we want these metrics to be moving forward. So I'm open to any feedback.
I'd like to add like a statement at the end of this day. I know that there's areas of comment,
Yeah.
but normally I'll do like a synopsis or something like that I would add.
So like overall, okay.
But that's kind of the general comments, I guess, because you can always type a separate letter and attach it. If you have like a lot of things to say and obviously one line doesn't fit it.
You mean like overall performance with all of, Mr. Arguello, overall performance with the six categories combined, like an average?
I would add a narrative. I have in the past. It hasn't been a point of contention in the past, which is the reason why I state it now. But
Yeah, I mean,
normally, what I'll do is I will do all of this, and then I would submit a narrative at the end.
I would say that anyone is permitted to file whatever comments that they feel would be beneficial to me getting a more specific view at their view of my performance. I'm open to whether that feedback is provided in the scores, in the comments, extended comments. Any of that would be welcome information.
It does say instead of explanation required for rating of needs improvement or commendable, but
Sure.
I mean, there's only 4 ratings. I would feel like that could be a place you could, there's only 6 categories, so with the extent of your job and what you have to do, I would want to comment on whether it was a 2, 3, 4, or whatever, not just the top or the bottom, right?
I think that's you must,
Okay.
if it is needs improvement or commendable, but it doesn't preclude you from scoring me or putting comments in
Okay.
if I'm at a 2 or a 3.
Okay.
Do you think we could get an update, not to give you more work right now, but your 100-day plan and kind of where you're at with that and how things are going there?
Sure. So
You don't have to do it right now. It could be later. Just kind of interested on how we're doing. I know you're out there and you're doing a lot of the things, so.
Yeah, so we're making tremendous progress. It's funny, when you sit down and you do 100 year, when you do, I'm thinking about your floodplain over there at AAA. When you sit down to do a 100-day plan, you start with this blank piece of paper, and you think to yourself, okay, here are all the things that I'm going to accomplish. And you rarely take into account all of the things that you don't plan for.
Like a hurricane?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps a hurricane, but there's so many other pieces to the puzzle. So what I want to say to that is I actually believe that we're making very good progress towards that. The main goal behind the 100-day plan was to really get out and meet as many stakeholders as possible, and to really get a good pulse as to where we are as a district and where people feel, number one, they're getting great value from the district, where they believe their experience could be enhanced, and how we can enhance it. So I think that between the meet and treat events, where I've had 4 out of 10, those have been very, very insightful, and I think that the platform has really been beneficial to move the discussion along at those events. Getting out to the schools, though, has been probably it's been the most fun. To be able to see the teachers in action in classrooms, be able to interact with employees that are there, and not just our school-based employees, but being able to talk to a maintenance person who's there on a work order, to be able to talk to the bus drivers that are lined up to pick up the kids because I happen to be there at the end of the day. Being able to get that feedback from them has been equally beneficial. Talking with the kids, we had some outstanding students come to the last meeting and speak very eloquently and respectfully about the cell phone policy. And my call that night, my first call, was to Mr. Fancher, where I said, make sure you set up time for me to come out and meet with those students. Because I really believe that, that number one, we were all impressed with the way that they presented their points. And they deserve an opportunity to have an audience with the superintendent to talk through where they believe there might be opportunities for common ground with this policy, and also other things that they may be interested in that I can assist with. And so that was, I haven't had a chance to meet with them. I was out there on Friday, and I told Mr. Fancher I'm still waiting for my invitation. So I know it's coming. But then also talking to the Senior Senate over at Gateway. And they actually were there attending last week for the meet and treat at Gateway. And, their ears were perked up when we were talking on the other side of the wall about cell phones. But I will tell you that their level of engagement, just in making their school the best it can possibly be, is very inspiring to me, because anytime you can deal with stakeholders that really have that much ownership in their day-to-day experience, it makes you want to work harder. And so, I invited them over to conduct their meetings in here. They are close enough where they could walk on over and they could conduct their meetings in this room where actual government business gets done. I think that would be really cool for them. So I segueing to kind of decentralizing some of the advisories and those types of things, we're putting those together now. So I know that we've worked really hard to kind of find a good cross-section of folks, whether it be small business advisory, whether it be faith-based advisory. These are things where we're trying to find a good cross-section of the community to make sure that we are responsive to what drives value for them out of their school system, and just putting me in front as much as possible.
One thing you mentioned, I'm sorry.
You're good? No?
One thing that you mentioned that I do believe that maybe should be a separate category because it really doesn't fit is operational excellence. Because you're right, because when you talk about operational excellence, I think of like measuring transportation, facilities and maintenance, the IT department, the IT is going to be doing an ERP. And it doesn't really fit into fiscal responsibility. Fiscal responsibilities, are we spending the money wisely, not are we accomplishing the goals?
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so I just think that fiscal responsibility is more of a finance function. Are we getting good value out of the contracts, or return on investment? But you're right, I do believe that, like for instance, if I say transportation, the buses came in on time. Where does that fit? Is that an academic
But
excellence?
this is based on the previous strategic plan, so
Right.
when we have our next one, and we want to like focus on like different KPIs, I feel like that's when we should have the conversation about like adding the operational excellence.
Right. But definitely, I think that's something that we should consider then, I guess, moving forward then. So I can table that to a
Yeah.
later conversation, but
Yeah.
I do believe that that can be separated and have like its own
Yeah, absolutely.
its own attention, because think about it, because a lot of the main goals have some kind of chief in charge of them. And I got a chief of operations, and I got a chief, technology guy, but they don't get to own a domain, you know what I mean? So it'd be nice for them to have like a domain that kind of like, okay, these are the responsibilities lined up with how we organize our organization, so to speak.
Do we have an update? Oh, sorry.
I was just going to add, we did split fiscal responsibility into 2 pieces last year, and the second piece is digital transformation. So that would fall under what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Right.
but I just like the idea of just calling it, hey, operational excellence. You know what I mean? Just kind of like its own thing in the K, and we put our KPIs to that, and what is operational excellence look
Right.
like?
So, two things. Number one, we will immediately change Mr. Thorne's title from Chief of Information and Technology to Chief Technology Guy. So Tanya, if you don't mind ordering a new nameplate for Mr. Thorne, Chief Technology Guy.
Got it.
Yep, thank you. So, I appreciate both comments. I do think that it's probably something that we need to be very intentional about as we plan for the next strategic plan. But as far as artifacts, things that we'll collect for this, we will go ahead and we will have artifacts under fiscal responsibility that will speak to transportation, that will speak to.
Some of
yeah.
them bleed over.
So they're gonna, that's where they will reside for this particular evaluation instrument. And this evaluation instrument is designed to do, 2 things. It's designed to give you, obviously, an overall picture as to what's going on in our district and what we've been able to accomplish. And then my assessment should be a reflection on how you view the operational day-to-day is going within the district, right? So this is, if you're not going through this with enough information about how things have gone during the course of the year, then absolutely that should be reflected somewhere on here, because we should be able to provide you that feedback in not just in what we're asking the board to adopt every 2 weeks, but also, events that you're invited to, conversations that we have, just individually, when you call forward, those types of things.
So I guess my last statement would be, I love where you're going. I love how structured it is. It's similar to what we've had before, so it's not that radically different. But one thing I would like to see is, like, this assessment is our expectations of you. I would like to see kind of trickle down a similar format. Because when I saw, like, for instance, when Dr. Allen applied for superintendent, his evaluation instrument was different than the superintendent's evaluation instrument. So I think it'd be kind of a good idea to have kind of a uniform structure, because at the end of the day, you're just the CEO. You're technically not doing anything specifically. You're delegating it out and having people perform those specific tasks. So I just think that it'd be a good idea from a strategic standpoint to have some kind of evaluation instrument that maybe not, safety and security doesn't apply to every single person, but to principals, maybe they should to a certain degree. Like, hey, did you do your threat assessments? You know what I mean? So, and they do hire people. Some schools have higher vacancy rates than others. So it's not like the entire thing doesn't apply to your downhill organizational chart, but at least some kind of template, then you kind of filter from there. So whatever, the point is that we're not evaluating the other folks on the organizational chart differently than what we're holding you to that standard. And I think that it's a good idea for you to achieve those goals, that people down the organizational chart are working toward achieving that at the same time.
No, 100%. I agree with you. I think that that our team, and we meet, just so you guys are aware, we meet every Monday from sometimes 8 to noon. We've gone that long. Usually it's between 2 and 3 hours, and we do go through. We go through this, but we also go through anything that is timely relative to their departments. And we try to flush out all of the details of those things. At the end of the day, this is what I've found. I've found that this is a very, very talented group, and there is not a moment that I can't get them when I need them, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I'm very inspired by their work. Their work actually really does kind of, that is the motor that runs me. They are very passionate about what they do. They're not afraid to be super passionate in front of me and advocate for the things that they believe are best for our kids and best for our staff members. So when I believe, and yes, this is the framework by which I think the collective work is assessed. If I believe that there ever is a point where these items begin to fall short, I know that I could pick up the phone or I could call any one of them into the office and we could go ahead and talk through it. I knew that when I came on board that there was talent that existed within this school district. And I still feel that way. I feel very strongly about the people that are sitting around the perimeter here, and him too, and Dana in the back. I feel very strongly about their commitment, bless you, and their ability to go ahead and meet what I believe to be the challenges that are laid out in here. We don't really address anything that isn't in here, which I think is also very healthy. They can handle that on their own. What I try to do, though, is I try to keep them focused on what the vision and mission really is. And it is outlined in here. It is these indicators within this instrument. And that's really where I believe we end up spending a majority of our time. So I'm very encouraged by the work that they do and inspired by the work that they do. And the one thing that I think I probably need to get better at, if I'm going to self-reflect for just a minute, is I need to release a little bit more, like we tell our teachers sometimes. I need to release to them a little bit more and allow them to go ahead and understand that the trust exists from my level, that they're going to go ahead and they're going to execute and do the right thing because that's what they've proven to this point. So I have no doubt that the folks that are around here will help us meet what's in here.
Dr. Shanoff, why wouldn't we get a jump on our strategic plan development now, considering there's so little quantitative margin to it, where we can judge, if we do everything perfectly in that 5th year, we still don't even know what that means in the last a strategic plan? Why, I mean, it seems like, especially coming at the end of that, it would be a good transition time. It would give us more time to focus on coming up with the quantitative data,
So
our
there's-
expectations.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So I think that there's a few considerations. Number one, we wanted to make sure that we got kind of a launching point. We wanted to make sure that we tied in my first 100 days with being able to pull together as much of that feedback as we possibly could, that we could essentially run a parallel community input for the next iteration of the strategic plan with my meet and treat events. So as I go around to these meet and treat events, I do share with everybody that, hey, look, this is not just an opportunity for me to get to know what you value. We're using your feedback as a launching point for what the value drivers need to be in our next iteration of the strategic plan. So there's that. The second thing would be, because our core business is student achievement, I think it's important for us to actually have that feedback in place from the state, so then we know where we are, especially if we're really moving towards quantitative data points for our measures here. What I don't want to do is I don't want to say, hey, look, we want to increase our district-wide graduation rate to 90%, but this year's graduation rate comes in at 91%. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of material that then is produced as a result of the strategic plan process. Yes, and lastly, we want to overlay, and I haven't had a chance to really do a lot of it, and part of it has to do with the fact that we haven't had enough time yet this year. But let's wait until after the first 9 weeks when I can actually do some overlay of like transportation metrics year over year. When I can look at vacancies year over year, when I can look at fund balance and other financial metrics year over year. So I want to be able to kind of, and work order data, those types of things. I want to be able to look at those things year over year and be able to say, all right, we may have some systems and structures that we've got in place right now that we've implemented this year that we're already seeing starting to take hold. Maybe we've done things to address chronic absenteeism that we haven't done in the past. Maybe we haven't done enough. Let's see what those absentee rates look like year over year, and let's then determine where that might fall into, our next iteration of the strategic plan. So I think that I don't think it's too early for us to start thinking about it. Where I think it may be too early is that if we are going to move to a more quantifiable measuring stick, we probably need just longer periods of data in order to really see where we're tracking. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Any more questions, team?
All right, so, Chair, if it's okay with you, I will go ahead and I will add this instrument to the next board agenda for approval. And then we'll use this for the upcoming year. And then what we'll plan for is, after we have completed this evaluation framework next July, we will then kind of come back together and work on hammering out a new evaluation system. Now, we could, if we're so efficient during the strategic planning process, we hammer out a new evaluation during that time, we can go ahead and we can skip that step after July. It'll be up to the board at the time that we do the strategic planning as to whether or not we want to carve out time to do that.
Great.
All right, thank you.
Who's the next?
4.
4 o'clock.